Hey everyone, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you. Now, I've not made a video in this kind of manner for a little while, and I thought it'd be a nice way to kind of wrap things up now that I'm back in the UK, home from Taiwan, where I've been at Computex. Now, I do need to say a big thank you to Corsair for, kind of giving me the chance to even go to Computex. It's the first time that I've been. Previously, I'd always shied away from it, because we'd normally have massive launches over there, so I'd be stuck at home working on all the reviews. So CES and Computex this year, if I'm honest, they were a little bit light. We didn't have any big graphics cards, we didn't have any big CPUs. Because we didn't have CPUs, it meant we didn't have motherboards. So that then kind of gave me the freedom to be able to take a week off and run away to the other side of the planet. So a massive thank you to them for that. But enough of that. Essentially, this video is my thoughts on the show. So I went around and I covered as much of the show as I possibly could have done. I saw a lot of the big boys out there. So saw Jay out there, Kyle, Paul was out there as well. Also Hardware Canics, and they were all out there with teams of people. It did make me feel even more of the kind of, they were definitely the professionals out there. I was kind of like the enthusiast, kind of, yeah, like the little boy. But that's cool because I know my place. But also it made me realise that if I'm going to do this more, then I'm definitely going to have to start taking people with me, because the workload is immense. Trying to get videos done, I was literally like getting videos done, getting an hour's sleep, getting uploading them, going back to sleep for a little bit, and this would have been in the afternoon so that I can then, because there are a lot of parties, there's quite a lot of socialising to be done, and you might think to yourself you don't have to do that, but when you're away on that side of the planet, you do need to kind of go and meet people that you might not get a chance to see until the following year. So you do have to go, and shake the right hands and stuff. And in all honesty, I didn't shake enough hands and see enough faces. And I know I didn't, because there was a few times that I was just like, I can't do this again tonight. Maybe I'm getting old. It's for the youngsters or something. But anyway, I've got some notes that I've written down on stuff that I've seen that I want to kind of bring up. Also some kind of like weird, not awards, but just kind of like my thoughts on what they'll mean to people. Like we've got like People's Choice, Shock of the Show, Enthusiast, kind of awards, but not awards, because I'm not kind of handing them out like that, but just to kind of give you guys the idea of what I think about it. Anyway, so we will start with something, and I'm going to start with this just because, in all honesty, this is something we've been waiting for so long. It was like a really big deal, and I would say this would be the People's Choice of the show, and that was Noctua have finally made a black cooler, and we also have black fans. Now they're not their server fans, they're not the PPC fans, they are the normal fans that you'd normally see in the brown colour, but just black. So we're going to have a new NHD 15, we're going to have a new NHU 12, and then there's going to be the new, I think it's the NH9 something it's called, but it's the flat ITX cooler. They are all in black, all of the fans that come with them in black, and it's such a monumental step forward for them. Yes, I will agree with everyone that's shouting at the screens now that I think they should have done this a lot sooner. And yes, I think there is probably quite a lot of merit to a lot of the chatter on the video that I put up first. That's the other thing, is I will put links underneath to the full YouTube videos that I've done for this before. So I've done a dedicated video on the Noctua stand, done a dedicated one for Asus, dedicated one for Cooler Master, dedicated one for Corsair as well. So I'll put all those links underneath, and the cards will pop up and all that sort of stuff. But the black cooler, it is a long time coming, and I do agree with a lot of people that this may have something to do with the fact that Be Quiet have chopped into their market share a little bit. But the thing is the Noctua stuff, even though it is as quiet, if not quieter than the Be Quiet stuff, it outperforms it by leagues of magnitude. So I think them going down this route kind of is, yeah, it's in response to something else, but it is also a little bit of a kind of swat off that, you know what I mean, our coolers aren't just rebranded Chinese designs with quiet fans on and they are black. These are dedicated proper nerdy, you know, we cover every single base and test every single base. The Noctua coolers are just, as far as air coolers get, really, they are as good as they get. They are the benchmark, and no one ever comes really that close. And so the fact that they're going black is kind of, it is a big deal. Now, they did say, and it was something that they said, that by painting them black, there will be a small margin of performance decrease, like 0.1 or 0.3 degrees. So it was just like, yeah, so massive then, really. But anyway, so black coolers, black fans, epic, long time coming. They say it might be the end of this year, beginning of next year. Something else that they did though, which was like the nerdiest thing in the world that I've ever seen, was a desk fan. And this was like the most over-engineered desk fan in the world, but it started with a fan that was blowing 5 volts. It was one of their 5-volt fans. And they started with that because eventually they're going to have a USB adapter for it, so you can literally just plug it into your system. But 5-volt fan, and then they had this aperture that they'd made up. And the long and short of it was, the aperture turned the circular motion of the fans and the way it moved into straight motion to come out. But then there was a venturi, so that when the air went through the venturi, it then, because it went from a big venturi to a small venturi, it sped the air up. But then there was also cuts in the side, and those cuts in the side basically meant that there was a low pressure zone when it came out, so that those cuts in the side then pulled air in from the side. And in all honesty, when you blew the fan on your face, didn't really move a lot of air. Bolt that thing to it, it was like, oh my, and it was a proper desk fan, and it was quiet. And it's like I said, it was like the most over-engineered, nerdy thing that you'd ever seen, which looked really simple, but it worked so well. And that's another reason why I wanted to mention it, because it was just like one of those things that you didn't necessarily think that they'd want to make, but they've gone to such great lengths to make it as good as they possibly can do. It's actually rather awesome. Again, they reckon it might be later this year, but it was cool. It was worthy of a mention. Next things that we'll talk about. Corsair 280X is a nice M80X case that was on their stand. I have actually had the full review ready for this before I left for Computex. Should probably put it up when I put this review up. And I want to get all my coverage for Computex sorted, and then I will put this up afterwards. So I've done a full review on this already. It's M80X, it's a cube, it's glass, it's actually pretty nice. It was one of the nice things that they had on their stand. The other thing is they've got some new RGB memory. So it's the Vengeance Pro RGB. It kind of brings them back in line, because I didn't really like their old RGB stuff. It's a bit of shock and horror. I didn't think the lighting was good enough on it. So now there's fully addressable multi-lanes on the lighting, so you can make them dance. The lights wrap right the way around the outside. You can see the lights down the side. You've got black and white models coming. So it's finally, I think they've kind of finally caught up, and they're back on their game again. The other thing with the RGB as well is they're doing up to 4,000 at launch when that happens. And I've got to do a full video about this as well, because I should have some kits come in. But then they're also going to be bringing out 4266, 4600 and 4700 with full RGB support. I'm not sure why you'd want to go that high with RGB, if I'm honest, because if you're going that high, you're probably going to be like a pro overclocker, dry ice or something like that, or just got too much money. But the few of you out there that are going to just have too much money, I'm not sure whether you're going to want RGB at that point. But, you know, it's something worth mentioning. Next, Cooler Master. They've got some pretty cool stuff, if I'm honest. So I saw the C700, which is what I would call the Cosmos, and it's the M. Now the M, they don't like me saying it, but it does kind of stand for maker. So it means it's the absolute top end of their range. So it's got an all new aluminium front. It's got addressable RGB wraps, RGB like lighting strips right the way around the top and the front. Underneath as well, you can completely rotate the inside. It comes with an extra panel for the back. You can actually mount your graphics cards vertically, not horizontally, like, you know, when we say we've got that kind of, well, mind you, people do say it's the vertical mount, don't they? But it's literally right up on its end at the front of the case, and looks completely nuts, but also rather awesome at the same time. That side of it though, one thing I didn't say to them, but with the way that that GPU was mounted at the front of the case like that, it did make me kind of want a glass front on the case, because it would have looked amazing to have had a full view of your GPU in there. Anyway, so that's an idea. So that was pretty cool. They've so they had the SL600M as well, which was a case where the power supply was in the front and it was a top to bottom kind of exhaust kind of cooling design. I did like that, but I didn't like the way that they had their GPU mounted. I didn't like the way that they had their CPU cooler mounted. And I definitely, if I was going to play around and test with that case, I'd want to test about air coolers basically pulling hot air directly off of the graphics cards. But even then, if you put an AIO in the roof, you could have a similar sort of thing. So that's something which is actually, it looks really cool, but it could end up being rather complicated to live with or set up correctly. So that's something that that's only a prototype as well, but that's something that I'm definitely looking forward to having a play with. They had some other PSUs and stuff with like displays on the side. Sadly, there was another brand that we'll talk about in a minute, which pretty much just, as far as power supplies is concerned, just put that sort of stuff in the shadows entirely. The ideas that the Cooler Master had with their power supply, I liked some of them, but the way that they were displaying the fan speed and stuff, it was kind of overshadowed by an arrogance of wanting to display their own logo, because it was a dual layer screen. So the screen behind with the actual useful information was darker, and then their actual Cooler Master logo was really bright, which is at the front, and it was completely the wrong way around. In all honesty, the Cooler Master logo should have been the darker one, and the more, the actual information should have been in full brightness at the front, and it should have, in all, the way it would have been mounted as well, for me it would have made more sense for them to have had just the information lit up on the side at full brightness, and even maybe then the possibility of being able to turn it down, and then just a Cooler Master logo on the top of the power supply. It didn't need to be the way it was. So there was lots of little things like that that were cool, and then there was sort of like little things that I was like, well, why didn't you do this and why didn't you do that? But anyway, so they did have a tech cooler, so a Peltier basically, and that does, with a Peltier you have a hot and a cold side. Now what they were doing was, it meant that they could really drastically reduce the water temperatures in an AIO loop. So they were putting it through one radiator, which was the 120mm radiator. At the point of the time I made the original video, which I will put a link to, they I couldn't remember which way round the rads went, but it goes into the first radiator, then it goes into the second radiator with the tech in it, or the Peltier cooler, and then it goes off again. And they have thermal probes so it doesn't cool it down too much, because if you cool your liquid down too much you can get condensation. So they're just literally trying to get it so that it essentially ramps itself up when you put load on it. I mean, that again is going to be something that's going to need a lot of testing. They are going to need to do a lot of testing to do it right. The hoses on the version that they had on the stand did look a bit crap, but there it was just a prototype. It was something that they were working on. So when it did come out, it probably would come with the braided hoses that we've got used to and like seeing now. But I would say for that at the show, that was the innovation product at the show for me. So I'm not handing out an innovation award, but I'm just trying to give this as a marker for you guys at home that was the innovative product for me. Now, they did also have, or do also have, a case sort of adapter plate stroke stand, which meant that you can turn your motherboard round and have it pretty much at the front of the case, and then you can have your graphics card stood upright, upright, bolt upright. And that almost fits at the back, where you'd almost expect your motherboard to be kind of pushed to. And this was something that you'll be able to slide in the master cases that are out at the moment, but it'll also fit in the H500. And that for me was quite literally like the enthusiast award of the show. It was made, it wasn't designed originally by Cooler Master, but it was something that one of the modders had designed, and Cooler Master are looking to work with them and bring it to market. I absolutely loved it. I did talk to them quite a lot because there was a lot of chatter about the materials that they were going to use, and it sounded like it was going to be quite expensive. So I've got a reasonable background with engineering, so I had quite a few long conversations with them, talking to them about type of materials, how they could then use those materials to speed up the machining process and essentially bring the cost right back down to a point that it would actually make sense to sell it as a product. Because the way it was at the show, you'd be looking at it costing about $150, and it's just too expensive to sell in any volume at that point. So they need to more than half the price, I think, for me to be able to see it as being a viable candidate to be sold to you guys at home. And then if they can do that and meet that price point, which if my thoughts about how that they can make changes will make any sense, then they can, I think, bring that price down, and then, like I said, make it a viable upgrade for any of you that have got any of their cases at the moment. And that was, out of anything at the show, and I did specifically ask this, that was the product. It was the product of the show, I personally think. Well, I gave it the Enthusiast Award because, let's face it, we're enthusiasts, but that was the one thing at that show that I wanted to bring home. So it might have been something really surprising. There might have you been out there that might have been thinking about, well, why didn't you want to bring the 28-core CPU home? And why didn't you want to bring, that new power supply home? That was the one, really, for me, that was just like, that is so good and wouldn't give you any issues. So power supply, I don't know when they're going to be ready. I don't know whether they would literally just there because they were there. The 28 core, the motherboard didn't really look that good, and you can tell it's just like a sample. They're still testing and doing all that sort of stuff. So that would have been the thing at the show. If I could have done, I would have picked it up and brought it home literally straight away. We've been talking about power supplies anyway. Moving on. I did make a video about the Asus stand, and we have been talking about power supplies. Now, they did have the Rog phone on the stand. Now, the phone side of things, for me, it's not some... I use a phone for the basic sort of stuff. I don't game on my phone or anything like that. I'm like... It's just sort of business for me, chatting with my friends, Facebook, the normal sort of stuff, Amazon, eBay, that sort of thing. But that was the first time I'd seen a phone where it became a very much kind of... crossing boundaries where a phone actually made sense for gaming. I stood and watched other hardcore gamers, enthusiast people at the show. I just stood there and paid attention to them playing games on it. And they've also got a controller for it, which has got its own screen as well, but you clip the phone in, so you end up with two screens. But then it's pretty much like a handheld Xbox controller that's had babies with like a Nintendo 3DS. So you've got that dual screen type of thing, but with an Xbox controller type of layout, and yet it's still your phone. And it was one of those times where it's just like, Asus have been trying to make phones for a while, and they've never really been any good. I know Mr. King at the moment is going to be flipping nuts about it, but I can remember when Gareth had phones and they were always going wrong, and the Rog phone genuinely was one of the first time they've made something in that format, so the handheld format, I was like, that looks like it could be an absolute game changer. So that, I think, for everyone out there, I think that's going to be something that you're going to want to watch. Yes, it's going to be something that you're going to need to make sure you do your research on, watch the reviews, be very critical about it. But that's probably the first time that they've done something like this, which I genuinely think has the ability to be amazing. I'm not saying it is, I'm saying the possibility is definitely there with this one. It is night and day different to anything that they've done in the past. It seems like they've really, really upped the ante with it. Anyway, so Shock of the Show award goes to the Thor power supply, and I can't remember the names, but they've brought out two AIO coolers as well. So the AIO coolers themselves, they're Asetek coolers, but they've got an active screen on the front, or one of them has. That's the one that I like. There's the bigger one which has a fan in, which is meant to cool VRMs. In all honesty, the Asus VRMs don't really need cooling, and I can't see personally that the AIO is going to be able to put enough air out without making noise to make any real difference to any hot VRMs. It's definitely the big square one is the one I want to test because I want to see how noisy that is. I'm personally out of the two, that is the one I am most skeptical about and worried about, if I'm honest. The one that is round with the screen on the top, that just ticks all the right boxes, if I'm honest. I wouldn't be surprised if that's going to upset a lot of people. Now, the one thing I can say about both the AIOs, more the round AIO, but the power supply as well, is I've never heard as many other vendors chatting about products in my life. Now, it was such a closely guarded secret that there was members of Asus staff that I deal with in the UK that weren't even, I didn't have any details about these new products whatsoever. So they were surprised with them when they got to Computex. There has been literally that level of secrecy behind it that even high up members of the Asus staffing team had no idea about it. So then that transposed into the fact that nobody in the industry really knew about it, because if there's people in Asus didn't know about it, then nobody in the industry knew about it. So everyone was talking about it. It was something that it was quite interesting to sit back and watch and see people chatting about it and pretty much like picking it apart in their mind's eye as well. Now, like I said, the round one, for me, I think that's the one to worry about. Because I think there's going to be a kind of, there's going to be compromises by having a fan in a block with not enough airflow. I think there's going to be air noise, or if there's no air noise, then it's not going to put enough air out to really be able to cool VRMs by any real amount. But we will see. It's definitely something that I have a list of points that I want to pick them apart with now. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. The Thor PSU, that in itself, it looks amazing. The fact that you've got ROG style motherboard VRM heatsinks inside the power supply goes to show you how much attention they've paid with it, and how, you know, they've not really rushed it out by the looks of things. The fact that it's got the big screen on the side so you can see active wattage, and you know, that in itself is very cool, but it's also a bit of a shame because lots of cases nowadays you have the power supply covers. So I can see a lot of people straight away, what I will say, and I'll say it right now, and remember I said it right now as well, so when all the power supply reviews start coming out, they're going to say the same thing, but you'll just be able to, if you've got a power supply cover, then just get your Dremel out, make a little cut where the screen's going to be, and then fit it. Remember, when you do cut though, cut small, because then you can always make it a little bit bigger. If you cut too big the first time, you can't then make it smaller again. But if you've got a power supply cover, there will be a way around it, so it's not that much of an issue. But that power supply, a lot of people are going to be saying, why 1200 watts? No one's going to want 1200 watts. Well, if you go into a show, you're not going to take a 650 watt power supply with you, are you? So you're going to focus on the big one to start off with, which is probably the one that will come first. But you can bet your bottom dollar there will be a range of those power supplies that will come out, but they're obviously going to start with the more expensive one first. They're not NVIDIA. Oh my God, there was so much chat about NVIDIA. There's actually been so much chat about NVIDIA at that show. A lot of it I'm actually not even allowed to talk to you about, and that's despite the fact I didn't actually even go and see NVIDIA. It's just a bit nuts. But anyway, so shock of the show, the Asus Thor power supply and the AIOs. Both really looking forward to seeing those. Other things to talk about, MSI 49-inch widescreen. It was a 3840 res by 1080. It was massive, 144 hertz, FreeSync. Literally, I looked at it and I was like, I need that on my racing rig. It is the perfect racing rig stroke sim monitor if you're not VR, because it's such a wide curve. It gives you a massive field of vision. It's literally perfect for racing. So that was probably the screen of the show for me, if I'm honest. It was also the thing on that stand that, again, was the one thing that I wanted to take home the most. And that's despite the fact that they did have a new motherboard on there. So they had a new motherboard on there. They're calling it the Creation. It's an X399 board that's been built for the ground up for Threadripper 2. That also is why it's got 19 phases on it. 19 power phases. And then and when you see the pictures and everything that's going to come up, that should also give you a little hint as to how much power the new Threadripper 32 cores are going to pull. Now, I've not tested a Threadripper 2, but when you double the amount of cores, they're never going to half the amount of power that it uses. So in the, you know, you've got to be sensible about it. We know it's going to use a load more power, and MSI have a motherboard ready and waiting for it that they designed with it to be able to feed it enough power. It does make me worry that even though it's the same chipset X399, it does make me worry that we're now going to have a 2-tier motherboard system with Threadripper, that if the old boards are not going to be able to give these the power that they needed. So it's got that in itself is going to be quite an interesting time, and we will see where that goes in the future, because it's all speculation at the moment, but I think that's the way it's going to go. We're going to have this 2-tier system. Now, the other thing that was released at the show, which was kind of cool, was the PowerColor Nano, and I may have brought one home with me. So I went and saw PowerColor, and they said that they had this one on display, which is a fully working sample, and then they had a dud in a box. And I said to them, why can't you put the dud on display? Because it was literally just on a stand. And I take that home with me, and then I test it. And they were like, there's no reason why, Tom. Why don't you do that? So I did. So I brought it back in my bag with me. I did get caught up at customs as well. I had to say it was an engineering sample and it's going back. Because it is an engineering sample. It's literally, there's no like product markings or anything on it. So this is a very bland, vanilla, but fully working version. I'm not sure whether they're going to have like stickers over the outside of the shroud or anything when they go full retail. I genuinely don't know, but I have one. So I'm looking forward to testing this. It's probably going to be the first like technical hardware-y sort of review that I'm going to be doing. Maybe towards the end of this week, we'll see how the jet lag and stuff kicks me. But it's a fully fledged 56, so Vega 56, in something which is as small, if not smaller, than an ITX sort of board format. So we know that the 56s or the Vegas can use a lot of power, so this is a very brave thing. And I'm hoping that the cooler's going to be good enough as well, but we will see. This is something I'm quite looking forward to having a play with. And then the other thing at the show was G.Skill had loads of mods on their stand. Literally, like, there was like 8 or 10 really amazing mods on the stand, which I was like, you know, I stood and I loved, and I enjoyed watching people and listening to people chatting about them as well. But the reason why I went to the G.Skill stand is they had new RGB memory. Shiny sides to it, like this. I don't know how to explain the way that the diffuser is made up on the top, but it almost looks like cracked glass, but it's clear with loads of cracks in it to catch the light. Looked amazing, like genuinely, absolutely looked epic. And that was for me, that memory was the, would get the aesthetics award, because it did look the absolute nuts. So exceptional aesthetics award for me. I mean, they had it on this little plinth, which was spinning around. I genuinely, G.Skill, Frank, I would love one of those stands so that I can put some up on the shelf. I genuinely love that thing. So anyway, so there's that. Would love to have one of those stands. Exceptional aesthetics for that memory. I would love to get my hands on some as well. G.Skill seems to be the stuff that the AMD boards have liked over the years as well. So it's always good to have for a tester's point of view, to have some G.Skill in. So yeah, would love some of that. So that was pretty much it for the show. I saw so many people. It's so nice when you go to stuff like this, because you do have the work side of it where I have to give stuff to you guys, but then you have the social aspect of it as well, where you're seeing people that you might only see once or twice a year. People in the industry, which, you know, I met for the very first time while I was over there. I'm not going to sit here and like start mentioning them, because I will forget. I'd have to write a list of people that I've met for the very first time, but you all know who you are. And it was very tiring. I hate the flying side of it, I'll admit, because it's just boring. I never managed to sleep. So like, for argument's sake, we worked out that from the moment I got up in Taiwan till the moment I got home was like 34 hours that I'd been awake, just, you know, bored out of my box. And then by the time I'd actually got asleep, we were probably around the kind of 40-hour mark, and it's a complete brain killer. So last night I slept quite well. In the office again today, make this video, get this done, and then I'm probably going to go and have a cup of tea and go back to bed. But I did want to make sure I did this debrief for you nice and early so that you got TTL's thoughts on Computex 2018. Again, a massive thank you to Corsair. I'm going to finish off by saying, yet again, a massive thank you to Pascal from Corsair as well. Literally, I would not have been able to have coped and done that show without all of the advice and help that he gave me. So, big thank you to you, Fat1. Yes, but for now at least, this is the tiniest of Logans with your end of Computex 2018 video out. Oh, ding!